Nick speaking, and welcome to this video right Necron learning curve, and today we're going to start looking at cryptics. Now first of all, the guy that you see in front of you, if you haven't heard about this already, this guy is part of my community cryptic project where I'm collecting cryptics and lords built, painted and converted by the wargaming community. And this guy is from IDICBeer, probably my most inspirational painter on YouTube. Chris, you're a fantastic painter, and I feel honoured to have this guy in my army. He's absolutely awesome. So thank you, Chris, and please go and check out Chris's channel, IDICBeer, link in the description below. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about the Harbringer of Despair. Now, if you want to find out a little bit more about the rules and how you can take how the war gear activates regarding splitting off different units and stuff like that, go and check out my first video. I think it was 2 videos ago, called the Royal Court, and that explains all about the rules and splitting off and how many bits of war gear you can take, etc. So in this video, we're just going to talk about the war gear and how potentially we could use it. So with the Harbringer of Despair, you must exchange his Staff of Light for an Abysmal Staff. Now first up, awesome. I mean, that is a template, Strength 8 AP1, fantastic. The only downside with that is that it uses the target's leadership to wound. So effectively, on its Strength 8, so I mean, if you had a leadership 8 or lower, you're going to be hitting on wounding on 4s, 3s, but most enemies you're going to be facing are going to be probably leadership 9 or 10, so you're going to be wounding on 5. So it's not quite as good as it sounds, and it has no effect against vehicles, which is a shame, but you know, you can't have everything. Still could be used in Overwatch though, so bear that in mind. So to get the most out of his staff, as everybody probably already knows, but just in case you don't, then basically you need to attach this guy to a unit of death marks. We've talked about death marks in a previous video, but basically attach him to death marks, and then whatever units the death marks mark to wound on a 2+, this guy who's joined with that unit is also going to hit that unit, wound that unit on a 2+. So now you have a Strength 8 AP1 template wounding on 2s. Awesome. What more can you want? Now combine that with the other piece of war gear that he has, which is the Veil of Darkness. The Veil of Darkness we shall talk about in a second, but first of all, how are you going to use your death marks? Well, yes, you could use the Veil of Darkness, which we'll talk about in a minute, which basically lets you deep strike. But generally, one of the better ways to use that would be to have them in a night scythe. This gives you huge movement, it lets you disembark, get the flamer in the position that you want, and hit that flamer. So that's got to be probably your #1 deployment for the Abysmal Staff. But yes, taking the Veil of Darkness, which basically lets you teleport deep strike around the table each turn, gives you another nice little option. Now unfortunately there's nothing we can do about the scatter, and obviously the flamer is fairly short, so you are going to be relying on a little bit of luck that you're not going to scatter out of range for the flamer. Okay, yes, even if you do, you still have your death marks, but they like to get quite close anyway to do your rapid fire stuff. So it's not quite a reliable delivery system, but it still works. It still gives you the option, and it gives you that movement to be able to move around each turn as well, just be quite annoying. So that certainly is an option. But the Veil of Darkness also has a more defensive role, let's say, more of a game-changing role in potentially standing back in your army, not using that Abysmal Staff, which does seem a shame, but as I said, without those death marks with them, you know, the Abysmal Staff isn't as good as maybe it sounds. But if you have him back in with a unit of warriors or maybe immortals, use you basically use it as like a sleeper unit, as Fritz would say. If you've been watching Fritz's videos lately, he's talking about sleeper units. And I suppose this is what this guy is. You have him at the back of your army, doing nothing all game, and then last minute you just veil him out onto an objective with some troops. Take that objective. Very, very valuable ability. And the great thing about this guy, if you have him in your army, is that you can use him in all different ways. I have got a video in the archives called "How to Win with a Cryptic." Pretty much shows you, or talks about the different ways that you can win with this guy, or you can use this. But effectively, if you've got this guy in your army, you can use it in so many different ways for each game that you play, which is really, really great. You can use it defensively, you can use it attacking wise, maybe have a big squad of immortals, teleport around each turn, using those gauze weapons, rapid firing, causing a bit of distraction. And it's nice to have a unit which can actually move quite fast in your Necron army, because generally they're pretty slow, apart from maybe 1 or 2 units. Certainly if you're going foot based, you are pretty slow, so having a Veil of Darkness Cryptic is actually very useful. Yeah, I mean, obviously there are lots of other little things to bear in mind. One tactic which I've used in the past is to have the Veil of Darkness on the guy that's in the Night Scythe with those death marks, so that once the death marks have bowed out, effectively, the next turn they can still veil around the table. Or potentially, if the Night Scythe gets taken out and your death marks then get put back into reserve, then when you come on the next turn, although you can't deep strike that turn that you come on, you can come on and walk. But effectively you're out of the game in those terms. But if you have your Veil of Darkness in there, you can come on and walk, and then the next turn you are free to veil around once again. So that potentially is worth considering as well. Okay, so that is pretty much it for this cryptic. There's one more piece of war gear which we haven't talked about yet, and that's the Nightmare Shroud. The Nightmare Shroud basically is an 18-inch, effectively a gun, so you have to use this as opposed to shooting, and then there's any unengaged unit will have to take a morale test or fall back. Pretty useful. It's nice, but you're not going to be shooting your staff, of course. Maybe if you're going to have both of these, so that if you're out of range of the flamer, you do have that longer 18-inch piece of war gear. Whether I personally don't take it. I mean, it's fairly cheap, I suppose, but we are still talking about a 1 wounded model, and if you put too many points into him, again, he's with Lookout Ceremony being a 4+, with barrage weapons and precision shots and things like that, he can be taken out. So putting too many points into him, you have to also bear that in mind as well, whether it's actually worth it. And most armies nowadays, they're pretty good leaderships anyway, so the chances are they're not going to fail. But it is a fun piece of war gear, maybe a bit of a surprise. I suppose it depends maybe on which army you're playing it against. And I play a lot against Marines, and I generally don't find that the Nightmare Shroud works very well against them. Okay, so that's it for this guy. Next up we're going to have a look at the Harbringer of Destruction. More to come.